very warm welcome to Capital Sports 3.0. I will be one of your co-hosts for this evening. My name is Alan Moore, and we're going to bring you the very best, well, just the very best sports news of the week and an awful lot more as well. Some great discussion coming up as well on this evening. So quickly starting with some news. Of course, Ireland finally won at football, so that's a very, very good thing. Today, Max Verstappen, he was, of course, in the Red Bull, and he won in an authoritarian kleptocracy with a terrible record on human rights and, of course, homicidal tendencies towards its neighbours. Before you start asking questions, no, it is not Britain. It is not even America. It's not even Russia or Ukraine. It's an oil-rich state, which is has one of the worst records in LGBT matters, and of course, it's using its oil wealth to clean its record. Of course, I am talking about Azerbaijan. So well done, Red Bull, for their own bit of sports washing. So straight away, Isel, Cody, and Andrew Flint, guys, great to have you on. And I'm sorry about the opening. I was trying to keep my tongue firmly in my own cheek rather than as some of those golfers on the live tour put their tongues somewhere else. Anyway, moving quickly on from that, we have an awful to get through. We have, as you see here, mucky massages, Saudi mania, boo boys and girls, and of course hot topics, and of course a big 550 quiz at the very end of it all, which I think our guys will really enjoy. Okay, starting off with our sports news of the week. There's a lot to digest, but I'm going to go through some fairly obvious, not obvious ones. So you're going to lead off on one. Deshaun Watson, one of the highest ever paid players in American football in the NFL, of course, he's now playing with the Cleveland Browns, moved from the Houston Texans. He used, now this is what the New York Post is saying, and there's an awful more to it, at least 66 female, not male, female massage therapists over 17 months. And he's been caught on record saying, do you know what? It doesn't matter if they have no experience. Eastland, over to you.
All right. Well, I'm going to mention him a bit later in the show as well. So to give a bit of a brief overview now, Deshaun was contacting these ladies via various social media platforms. And the allegation is, as of today, 24 separate civil cases have been filed by one lawyer representing them all in relation to allegations of sexual assault in the context of these massages. Now, I don't know about you, but a professional athlete, one would hope that they would be getting professional masseurs, given they are athletes, but that wasn't apparently a requirement for poor Deshaun. So Deshaun, in the middle of all this, I'm going to talk maybe later in the hot topics about his own contractual position and the Browns and Texans thing, because that's very interesting. But at the moment, basically, his lawyer has been on a charm offensive and suddenly speaking to the media for the first time since this all broke over the last 2 weeks. And the reason he has obviously been coming out to the media and being so clear on his client's innocence in terms of the civil actions and any potential criminal cases is because he knew this New York Post story was coming. The details in this are absolutely shocking. So much so that at one point they're discussing the fact, the content of this report, and his lawyer says there is nothing illegal about a massage ending with a happy ending, which is not what you want your lawyer to say. Just as an FYI, if you're a lawyer and that's your line, it's not a good thing. He's basically suggesting that Deshaun managed to charm all of these women into thinking that, as opposed to the massage which this unqualified person was going to give him, it was absolutely okay to have some sort of sexual contact as part of this, which obviously is a huge issue. And the problem for Deshaun now is that the league, if these cases move forward, even as allegations, whether criminal charges are brought or not, that's not a precursor. The league has to take action. So if we look at Ezekiel Elliott, I think is probably the prime example. He got a 6-game ban at one stage, and his ban was without any criminal charges being brought. So if we look at the number of allegations here, the number of filed cases, irrespective of the New York Post comment, is already over 20. So at this point, it's going to look like the league are going to have to take a stance and come up with some form of sanction. And the difficulty here is, in the past, Roger Goodell got to give his sanction. And now, as a result of the collective bargaining agreement in 2020, basically what's happened is it's actually a federal judge who will hand down the sanction, and then it can be appealed to Roger Goodell. So irrespective, you don't need a criminal conviction for the league to sanction your behaviour. They have a very strong stance, at least outwardly now, on any players in these sort of circumstances, whether it's allegations of sexual misconduct or allegations of domestic violence. It's their policy will be you will get a ban. And it's just going to be very interesting to see, will they look at all these claims and say these are repeated offences and come down really hard on Deshaun Watson?
Andrew, going to ask you this. I mean, it's a strange one, of course. This says like more like that he spent too much time watching porn movies. Um, and he's made so much money. He's $185 million guaranteed for the next 5 years. Um, Silence from the Cleveland Browns. The Houston Texans apparently they were allowing him to use rooms in the hotel for these sessions.
Mm.
Andrew, this sounds like English Premier League stuff with Jordan Lockdown, the Man City players bringing in prostitutes into their houses. And I mean, this sounds mad.
It doesn't sound like they were completely ignorant of what was going on, to put it lightly. I mean, one detail that stood out for me was how he apparently said he spoke to, I think it was a legal representative of the Texans who provided him with non-disclosure agreements to give to, and he started giving them to all these masseuses who he turned up at. He probably thought that's a get out of jail free card. I mean, why are they doing that? I mean, just like Iseult mentioned, if you're a professional athlete at a professional sports massages are vitally important for muscle recovery. If he wants a massage, I don't think he's going to have trouble getting an actual massage he needs. And yet the Texans were in communication through some representatives, at least, knowing that he was going to massages elsewhere. They have a contracted group of masseuses, a massage group, I believe, and it wasn't with them. So I don't think they can say we didn't know what was going on, and yet that's a lot of the noise that we're hearing. I think they probably thought, well, we'll give him these NDAs, and hopefully it will stay quiet, and we won't have to worry about it. Without actually thinking, hang on a minute, Deshaun, look, you're a star, you're a big name, and this is not good for anybody. Just even if they forget, if he had actually committed these alleged assaults, if you want to call it that, just from an image point of view, the club, the Texans, himself, all his sponsors, don't be stupid. And yet, it doesn't look like they were overly officious with warning him off this type of behaviour.
I mean, there is this. We see it in sports in general. There's a sense of entitlement that athletes, male and female, there's no division on this. In American football and baseball, they slide through from high school. They're basically, because they're good at running with a ball and putting their head down and smashing their helmet into someone else's helmet. That means that they're good. I think it's Baker, the detective in Houston, Commissioner Baker.
Mm-hmm.
She basically said that the charges are indecent assault, which could be exposing himself, sexual assault, and prostitution. And she said that she was very confident in bringing this forward in a court case. Iseult, okay, the police can say what they want, but where does the fault lie? Andrew said, yes, if these women sort of kind of understood, they were signing NDAs. Surely signing the NDAs, how can you stand up in court? Standing up being a very inappropriate term, of course.
So the NDAs were brought in, basically the draft agreement that he used going forward was after one particular complainant had said she would publicly come out and say he had done this, that, and the other. And that was when the club decided to get the NDA in. An NDA, while it's a binding agreement and presumably there were sweeteners thrown into it, it's not going to come secondary to court cases in a legal context. But the difficulty here with these being brought forward as criminal cases is Texas, where a vast majority of the offences are alleged to have taken place, have an extremely short statute of limitations. in terms of certain crimes and also in terms of certain civil actions. So, what we're likely to see in the next while will actually be the potential, based on what's in the New York Post article, for complainants who haven't had their cases fully moved ahead to add the Texans, because obviously they could be viewed, in this instance, Deshaun Watson isn't short of a bob or two, but they could be viewed as having facilitated this. And to a certain extent, they were booking the hotel rooms for him. They were providing the agreement to prevent these people coming out after what they may have viewed as actual massages and where they were sexually assaulted, allegedly. They may view this as the Texans being complicit in this. And while that wouldn't necessarily move matters on in a criminal case, because by its nature, the type of offence being alleged is very much a case of you can be complicit in the background, but it'd be very hard to prove that the Texans knew what was going to happen in those hotel rooms. That certainly doesn't stop them from being viewed as potentially liable in a civil case. And I think that's going to be a huge concern for the Texans. Everything that comes out of this suggests that while you can say the Browns made a very bad call on who they took on, the Texans were fully aware of what was going on for a considerable period of time. Also, can we just note, it was during...
Sorry,
I was going to say, it was during COVID.
Yeah, but this whole thing, and for me, this sounds very much like how, I hate to say it, Catholic Church operated in moving bad priests around, saying, "Oh well, if they're out of there, it'll change. It'll wake them up. We'll have a word with them. We'll put them into training and understanding and so on." The same way that tennis coaches, they said to get a rap in the knuckle and say, "Oh, don't do that," and so on. This same with gymnastics coaches. They moved them from one gym to another because we won't put them in with young girls or with young boys because they'd be less likely to offend young boys. Whereas it just doesn't work out. And I'm going to start off with you in the next one. This is from the Independent, of course. The Independent, one of the newspapers, screeching about the LIV, the Live Golf Tour, which of course is being funded by Saudi Arabia. But of course, they had breathless updates on who's going to win. The winner, of course, getting an absolute whopping $4 million, Charles Schwartzel, and last place getting $120,000. Is this much ado about nothing, Andrew? Because there's been an awful lot of screeching from an awful lot of journalists who are very happy to take on, packages to luxury hotels around the world if the money's right.
Well, I think firstly, the screeching, whether it is over the top or not, is certainly based in a very correct moral stance, and yet it comes back to matters we've discussed so many times. It has to be consistent across the board. That's the one thing I would only say. Now, the press conferences we've seen from the big names that they've reeled in, Phil Mickelson, of course, originally had, should we say, a tense relationship with LIV golf tournament, is raking in huge amounts of money. And he says, I feel like I'm a humbled person. We've got the likes of Dustin Johnson saying he's making this decision for his family. Now, these sort of quotes don't fool anybody on any level. How much of $150 million made it right for your family, Dustin? I mean, look, it's for money. Now, just for money, you can criticize sportsmen for chasing money all you like. If money is offered to you, you take it. You can't criticize them for that, because that's just being pathetic. I mean, if whatever job you're in, if you're offered 5 times, 10 times your salary, you take it. Now, okay, the moral aspect. How much of this is virtual signaling, to use the modern phrase? Honestly, I think it does cross a line on my books, for one very, very simple reason. This is part of, it's not just one sports washing incident. Sports washing is the very cleanest way to actually call this. With Newcastle's investment, that's just one part of it. Saudi Arabia had a very, very long history of investment in English football that a lot of people gloss over. Manchester United have had, in fact, one of their longest contractual obligations with a Saudi-linked group since, I believe, even the 1980s, the late 80s. So my point is this is quite clearly a huge concerted effort. Any sports group of any kind, if it's just a country hosting, you don't just host one event, you host a golden age of events. I mean, in Russia, we had the Sochi Olympics, we had the World Cup, we had the F1 races, the Sochi drone there. We've had international tournaments of all kinds. A country doesn't just host one. You host a whole series of events, so it becomes embedded into the consciousness of sports fans, and that is what Saudi Arabian investment is doing in a massive level right now. The amount of money involved in this golf tournament is something, but it's a lot less than what will end up going into Newcastle alone. But I think it has to be asked. The question has to be asked.
Okay, Isolt, I know you're a golf fan. You've been watching Rory playing in the Canadian Open, of course. Yeah, I just say something behind you. For me, I'll always put this with a little asterisk that I worked in Saudi Arabia, so all money in Saudi Arabia, like in many countries like that, where there's a sort of like Azerbaijan, Russia, where there's a strong kind of like family government at the top, and then the money trickles down. So I will remove myself from the argument and say that it's wrong, and also that it's right, because I can't see the difference in this than America and companies pushing money into the PGA, excuse me, or other events. Is sports washing just a kind of a catchphrase, like a one phrase, or is it just going to sort of go away because it's gone on everywhere?
So sports washing isn't just for the countries that we necessarily, because of the privileged position we have of, let's say, for those of us in Ireland, we look around and we go, things are fairly good in terms of our human rights, etc. So we're just going to look down on those other countries. There are problems globally. The problem with Saudi Arabia and their concerted effort is they're not even being discreet about it. This is an effort to distract people and to make people look at what they're doing with their money in terms of sports, be it Newcastle, be it the golf, be it boxing going there, etc., because they have a stated vision to have their country appear to be a very different place and to welcome tourists, etc. They've music concerts going on. I don't think we have a term for music washing yet, but I will come up with one. But the problem is, in the same way we see Man City and the money being ploughed in there, sports washing is a real issue. And it doesn't necessarily just have to be those sort of countries. But the problem with what Saudi Arabia are doing is we know their human rights record. We know what happened to Kipchoge. Like, it's a deliberate effort by a nation to have us look at what they're doing in a different area, so we're not looking closer to home. Same with Qatar hosting the World Cup. What I think is interesting about this, and while Rory is on in the background here, I can say that, like, Rory has been extremely strong, coming out and basically saying, you can't say, you as a very wealthy individual, you're getting financial security when you really, if you've done anything sensible with your money, 100 million at any stage, you should be financially secure for life. That your financial security matters more than the lives of people, and optically making it seem like it's okay to deal with Saudi Arabia in this fashion. We've also seen for the first time any sporting organisation come out and say, actually, we're going to sanction players. Now, I know it's in the PGA's interest to not have them play in this tournament, but the PGA's statement, I think it's the first time I've read a sports body actually say, you're going for the money, but it's also the wrong reasons. Like, they're very clear on what they think is going on here. And the fact that they're actually holding firm and saying, look, we're losing some of the biggest names. Like, obviously, the likes of Graham McDowell is no loss to the PGA in the way Dustin Johnson, Bryson DeChambeau, Patrick Reed, like Phil Mickelson, like, these are big names to be losing. And the fact that the PGA are holding firm on that and saying, we're not taking you, is a good thing to see in sports. And it's a pity that other sports couldn't take that sort of stance, or that other governing bodies wouldn't say, actually, do you know what, guys? We don't really want such and such a sport going to Saudi Arabia because of their record. Or footballers going, do you know what? I love playing for my country, but I don't really want to go to Qatar, where I know the cost that this World Cup is going to have on human lives. So fair play to the PGA for at least holding firm. Let's see how long it lasts. And let's just hope that the players who are showing some form of moral compass, because don't think that the likes of Rory McIlroy and the Justin Thomases, etc., haven't been approached. They're holding firm. And
they have been. No, they have. I mean, they have been approached. For me, it's interesting. There's an awful lot of hammering at Saudi about this in the Middle East. China is escaping an awful lot with this, because the number of Chinese investors and owners of clubs in England, for example, I think Inter Milan is still owned by Chinese. Valencia is owned by Chinese, through very, sports washing as well. And so if this is such an issue, for example, if it's in football, then shouldn't the English government do as it did with uh, Roman Abramovich and take away their rights? Again, that's a question for another day. But I'm the very next topic, last one before we go to a short break, is this. Uh, I'll say a sort of a fancy dream from an English sports writer who never really saw that much wrong with Daniel Kinahan, but he said that Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua, of course, Fury's retired, but if it's to go ahead, it cannot go ahead in Saudi Arabia, where of course Joshua defeated in a revenge match against Johnny Ruiz. Well, not Johnny Ruiz, sorry, not Johnny Ruiz. Johnny Ruiz was the former champion. What was it, Ruiz? Andy Ruiz. Andy, sorry. Yeah, his brother, his shorter, fatter brother. John Ruiz is a big guy who was a world champion a long time ago, so it shows my age. The funny thing is that with Mike Walters, that he said it belongs only in Britain, and it would be an abhorrent slap in the face for the punters if it ended up in the Middle East on the altar of cleansing the Saudis' awful record on human rights. Written the same time as Afghan refugees are going to be sent down to Rwanda from England. People who fled for their lives who actually relocated to England. They're sent down to Rwanda, not for processing, as the Rwandans have just said today. They're there to be integrated into the Rwandan community. So from Afghanistan to Rwanda, oh my goodness, Kabul to Kigali, it just doesn't make sense. Andrew, start with you in this a very, very quick minute on this. Fury Joshua, it can be held within a sealed room as what they did, or someone's back garden. Does it really matter?
In this sense, money is why, for fairly obvious reasons. I mean, look, packing out a stadium, Esau, as we know, is a huge fan of the atmosphere live at events. Live sport, you need the biggest venues packed full of people who want to be there. Now, from what I read, there was even talk of a specially built venue for the fight, which would just for me make it even worse. Look, a fight like this doesn't really need a great deal of promotion. It sells itself, doesn't it? I mean, look, whether you believe in how much of a grudge there is, it's two huge names in boxing. They could put it in virtually any stadium in the world and almost sell it out. So I find it very disappointing, to be honest. I think it would be very easily avoided. Whether you agree or not that this is screeching or not, it could easily be sold out at Wembley. It could be sold out in. You could sell out virtually any venue you want and avoid all of this talk. Now, whether you think that's fair or not is almost besides the point. You know this sort of talk is going to come. You know you're going to have to defend the people who call it abhorrent, a slap in the face. Whether that's right or not, you're going to have to face it. Well, avoid that in the first place. Take it somewhere where you can definitely sell out a huge amount of money. So okay. I think it's disappointing.
Okay, Isla, they're saying that this could be in the days before the World Cup final in Qatar. There seems to be an awful lot of Jolly hockey sticks and Johnny Foreigner in this as well. Andrew's right that it can be held in Wembley Stadium and sell out. But Fury's retired. Is this the media trying to whip up something out of nothing because he's going to get readers clicking through on the website because he mentioned Saudi, LIV golf, and human rights all in the one article?
Some beautiful bit of clickbaiting there. So basically, when you look at it, there's a few things to consider here. Firstly, Fury is ostensibly retired, as he likes to tell us. Secondly, Saudi might be a convenient location for his favourite former manager who he knew nothing about being involved in criminality to pop down from his current home to join him in. That's Daniel. That he might be able to come and see the fight there, although I wouldn't fancy his chances in a Saudi prison. But more importantly, I think the thing here is we have to remember that AJ has to fight Usyk, and that's scheduled to likely happen in August in Saudi Arabia because it's where they're getting the biggest site fee. So let's not suggest that it's there because the Saudis are going to offer any great, like whether it's a purpose-built stadium for that or whether it's the best of the best in terms of what they'll provide for ring walks, what they'll provide the fighters with in terms of hotels, 6-star luxury, blah, blah, blah. It's there because it's the most money for the promoters, it's the most money for the boxers. And unfortunately, Like boxing is two people in a ring. One of those men could say, actually, do you know what? I don't want to go to Saudi Arabia. I feel I'm going to make a stand here. And there's only two of us. So if I say no, that ends the discussion. But neither of them will do that. And that's what we've seen. When we've seen fights going to Saudi, that's a decision by the boxers, because these are the biggest names in boxing. These are bigger than any of the other names. Like if Anthony Joshua says, do you know what? I'm not going to Saudi Arabia. The fight's not going. And I think in terms of Tyson Fury, I certainly wouldn't expect to see him out again this year, and I certainly wouldn't expect to see him against AJ, probably because I don't think AJ beats Usyk in the rematch. Just a view.
Okay. No, listen, I'm. This is down to personal responsibility, which you both mentioned in terms of golf, which you mentioned in terms of going to Qatar, for example. If the footballers who were, wearing the rainbow laces or rainbow armbands or taking a knee in solidarity with oppressed peoples, surely they would do it, or not go to a country where they are, like LGBT people are oppressed, imprisoned, and murdered, officially murdered, as in like sanctioned government executions. For example, in Saudi Arabia, or the fact that Nepalese and Indian, very poverty-stricken people, are being basically, burnt to death in the open sun through the heat. But of course, some lives matter more than others, and money wins overall. We're back in a moment with some talking points, very much related to personal responsibility. Okay, back. Isel is there, but in the dark. So I guess the lights must have closed. Oh no, she just reinvigorated her screen. Okay, talking point that I want to bring it to you guys today is something that kind of got to me this past week, because I read quite a lot about it, and it really did bother me what happened, and also the reaction to it, and the kind of two-faced kind of back and forth about it that just didn't seem to make sense. Talking point is quite simple. It's about booing in stadiums. Last weekend, of course, Hungary, who were playing behind closed doors, but they had a lot of children there with their adults who were meant to take them. So kids under 14. There was 30,000, I think, in the beautiful, beautiful Pushka Stadium in Budapest, which is actually right next to one of the main Keleti railway station and close to one of the very best shopping centres in Hungary. The kids were booing. Okay, so the kids booed when the players took a knee in support of Black Lives Matter, of course. Now, Gareth Southgate, of course, he was kind of okay with it, or not okay, but he sort of said, well, when it came out, there was a bit of pantomime booing for England coming out. England, of course, didn't win that game, which made it a little bit worse, but the kids booed. For me, I'm going to start, Andrew, you with this. Fans booing and taking the knee. We've covered this before many times. What was the point of taking the knee in Budapest? Was it say we're going to sort of make sure that you know your place?
Well, I think firstly we do need to remember that the England squad, and Southgate has been a vocal focal point of this, have been consistent with taking the knee. They made it a point to do that for a while now. And I think there's no point trying to skirt around the issue. Going to anywhere in Central Eastern Europe, the mentality of a lot of English fans, the players, will be, well, this is a place we think possibly we need to do it even more, simply because of the laws in those countries. Now, the incidents that have happened give them justification for it. On one sense, if that is the process they choose to make, then it would be almost hypocritical not to take the knee going to Hungary. A reaction to the booing, well, I mean, by now they'll be used to it. There's been a lot of booing in various sections, not just in other countries. I should point out certain areas of England itself when England have been playing home games. So it's not specific to any other country. If you're going to make a protest and you believe in it, And from what we've heard from Southgate and the players, that's their chosen form of protest. They have to be consistent and keep doing it for as long as they feel they need to. At the same time, I would say there can't be a great deal of shock or surprise. They have to understand whether they like it or agree with it or not. People have different viewpoints. People may not agree with that form of protest. Maybe they agree with the point, but not that form of protest. So they have to understand just as their right to protest should be protected, so should other people's to voice their opinion, as long as it doesn't get into, really serious abuse. Just booing, I don't think anybody, whether you agree with the point of view, can attack people for simply voicing their opinion, because that's exactly what a protest is on the other side of the coin.
So Andrew's right. Actually, it's a protest against this that they're I've been in Hungary many times. I've done work there. I've actually played sports there as well. I've had no problem, but then again, I'm not coloured, so that's a big sort of like thing to mention that is the case. The reaction to it, as some of like, it was screaming because just as something that we had discussed, for example, death threats and booing of Harry Maguire when he plays for England.
Yeah, so I think that they would say, yeah, it's booing, and it's not necessarily shouting of abusive things that may go so far as to be racist comments in response to what is a protest that's trying to highlight issues to do with racism in sport and just in general in life. But unfortunately, I think the issue, and Gareth Southgate perhaps touched on it, while you can't sanction booing, it perhaps gives you an indication of the mindset. If you have children of that age whose instant reaction is to boo when they see the Black Lives Matter protest. And I think it's also extremely important, as Andrew rightly said, for teams to, if you have made this your stance, you carry on, irrespective of the booing, irrespective of anything else, because these are players who do have black teammates, and they're participating for a reason. And I think for unity as a team, if you decide you're going to do any sort of thing, you have to be consistent in whether it's protest, whether it's an approach to training. Your consistency is key. And it also gives a clear message to your fans that if this is something you believe in, the players are going to take a knee. Are you going to really boo your own players? And unfortunately, in the case of English fans, that is something that happens, which is in itself alarming. But I think we really have to worry about the environment they're going into when kids feel that it's appropriate to do that, because it's something they're not necessarily understanding what the protest is. Their difficulty with it is obviously being something that's either being explained to them or learnt at that young an age, and it's disheartening to say the least.
Is it maybe a case? Stay with you on this, Isolt. Is it a case that the kids and many people feel othered? For example, in Hungary, a very, very simple fact that when there was the migration of an awful lot of people who came like through Turkey and Greece and came up, Turkey was overloaded in many senses. I mean, it's not a rich country. They do well. It's there's a lot of huge pluses in Hungary. However, it was difficult for them to hold that, and there is that kind of resentment of the outside because they're very kind of internal and they've been kicked around for a long time, but they feel othered, and we see that in a lot of Eastern Europe. And it's not that for example, we'd say like in Russia or in Croatia. I always give the example in Croatia when I heard our Hajduk Split fans throwing peanuts and making monkey chants and terrible chants against the Roman players, AS Roman players in the UEFA Cup match. And I was trying to figure out when I asked them, why are you doing that? We have a black player as well. But like, oh yeah, but that's our black player. So Isel, is it just a case, because we did hear, I said like the next part is when this inherited thinking that Gareth Southgate mentioned. And we've seen it. We've seen it, of course. He says it's inherited. But is it a case? Okay, two questions on this. One, is it that these people feel kind of othered? And secondly, are they learning from somewhere else? And I would mention England that.
So yeah, I think in terms of are they feeling othered, well, there's no one who's going to feel more othered than a player who's on a field surrounded by all the fans in the stadium who are booing at him trying to be part of a protest. Like if you're a black player in that team and that's what you're hearing, you're going to feel a lot more othered than the people in the crowd who feel that as a nationality, people might not necessarily feel the fondest for them when they do things like this. Behavior like that is, and unfortunately, it's not the first of these incidents. Behavior like that is what causes other nations to, whether it's have a certain view on them or look down in a certain perspective, because that reaction, and I think the reaction of the English fans to boo a national anthem, I everything about that I detest in any form of sport. I detest when people boo opposition players, even in, unless there has been a foul, then you can chant and do all of that, and you can express your dissatisfaction. But I think there is something inherently wrong where your instant reaction at a sporting event, which is meant to be a tournament between two teams based on their competitive merits, and the idea is sport should be inherently fair, and you're going out to boo a national anthem. The problem there is the people who think that booing a national anthem is appropriate, the people who think booing a protest is appropriate. Like, their moral compass, like, I'm presuming they're all going to be signing up to watch all of the live golf tournaments because they have their own moral compass issues, as far as I can tell. But there needs to be something more done, that these sort of people are made feel marginalized as opposed to part of the group, and particularly in England. That's a much more straightforward thing to say. You should be in the minority in England booing a national anthem. You shouldn't be in the majority.
Andrew, remember we had Jack Parr, of course, who was at the European Championship final last year, and he told us about how he felt, it was dangerous, but also that he couldn't understand the booing, and he wanted to say to some people, "Why are you booing?" He's an English fan, proud English fan, and he wanted to say, "Why are you booing?" But he was kind of afraid. And I will say this big plus to the English media, because people say, well, what about, look what the English fans did. Look, listen what they were doing. Yeah, the English media wrote about it. They might have some people say, oh, well, it's like the Liverpool fans, it's okay for them to boo the English anthem because, like, Liverpool is very oppressed. That, to me, is a lot of bollocks, excuse me. But I think that's nonsense. Like, if you don't have to boo, just stay silent. Just turn your back on the field, do something. But to boo is like, look at me, I'm so oppressed. Andrew, we're giving the English fans a kicking, but I also was remembering this with their, booing, taking a knee before they played Croatia last year.
Exactly. Yeah.
And of course, Gareth said there's inherited thinking, which is probably, it's right. As Isla said, this has been handed down. This is something that's there. They hear around, they feel around them. But Boris Johnson, when the English fans are booing last year, he and Priti Patel, of course, who have just sent down Afghans down to Africa. Again, I do not understand whatsoever. He said, well, we can't, because if Gareth Southgate is saying like that they're being influenced by older people, older adults, Boris Johnson had something very different to say. He basically said that he fully respects the right of those who choose to peacefully protest and make their feelings known. Andrew, that's what you said. It's a protest against a protest.
Well, look, this is. Some people look at this issue on different levels. Some people will look at it just purely on racism. Is it good or bad? If you do one, then you support it. If you do the other, you don't. And nobody in their right minds who is saying can obviously outright support racism and be a remotely respectable person. That's obviously a given. I'm not going to back Boris Johnson here because nobody in their right mind would do that either. But I think he's trying to be the Ricky Gervais of politicians here. We know how much Ricky Gervais loves to say, I've got to defend all free speech. And there was one of his stand-up shows when he went on and on about how he was defending somebody who was criticizing him because free speech should be an absolute golden benchmark. Now, I think there's some, and I mean only some, element of truth behind that. I go back to what I was saying earlier. Both forms are a form of protest, the actual taking the knee and the booing it. But I think there has to be a line drawn at some point. I think actually Gareth Southgate's point was a very good one. It's this conditioned thinking that's been passed down a generation where actually not a lot of thought as to why you are booing has been educated to the younger generation. It's just a popular thing to do. I think, honestly, without having been there, I think I'm fairly safe to say that's probably why a lot of those 30,000 14-year-olds were booing. Because, well, everybody else is. Not, I actively dislike this particular form of protest. I don't want racism, but I don't support this because the movement itself has become politicized or whatever it is. I very much doubt some 14-year-old Hungarians are thinking on that level, that depth of disagreement with taking the knee. So basically, I guess what I'm trying to say is this. You can't, not everybody's booing for the same reasons. Some people may genuinely believe, look, I abhor racism. I just don't believe this is the form of protest that makes a difference. It's virtue signaling. They may say this is virtue signaling, and that is doing more damage than good. Some people will genuinely say that, and I think you have to at least listen to that side of the conversation. But there will be a lot more who are simply booing because they think, I don't like that player, how he looks. How do you distinguish the two? You can't.
No, I'm going to leave East with the last word in this. So I will say that with Garrett, I mean, I like him, admire him. I think he was a very good player. He's been a very good coach. He will go in English history as a very, very good coach. But of course, he's one person, as we're talking about, like learning from the older people. He is in a position of power, an older, statesman, shall we say, in the world of football. He had no problem bringing Dr. Rob Chakravarti into the English mix, a guy who was under investigation for giving injections, very high doses of L-carnitine to Mo Salah when he was working with UK Athletics, as well as other things he was up to as well, that were basically hushed up, and he was removed then from UK Athletics and taken over to the English football team. Of course, if you think about it, Garteket had no problem bringing in a doctor who didn't even write down, didn't even make notes of what he was injecting into people. But he's going to work with these racehorses and as in players. And what was the first thing he did when he came in? He wrote to all the English Premier League clubs and said, I want them all to be checked for thyroid problems. Why? Because with thyroid problems, they can get injections to keep them slim. So Gareth, go with God. Esau, very quick last one. Just what can be done? 2 words. What can be done?
Very little. Unfortunately, because
I asked Andrew, 2 words, you gave it 2.
And Andrew has it quite spot on. You can't differentiate between which fans are booing because everyone around you is booing and you're a teenager and you're joining in. Which fans are booing going, I'm against this protest, or which fans are booing because they're just racists. What needs to be done, I think, to an extent, is that as long as, and this goes for English fans too, if you have fans who, you put up signs, the same way you do in rugby where it says respect the kicker, you put up signs and you say respect the anthem, and you go, do you know what? Every time we've people doing this, or every time we've people who are booing aggressively when there's a minute's silence or a peaceful protest, which kneeling, taking the knee is a peaceful form of protest. You come down hard in the FA. You say to them, look, guys, we're not going to have this. Either your fans learn how to behave better or we're going to keep sanctioning you. Because at the end of the day, if you start removing fans or you start having consequences for the various countries, their national teams, fan behavior will change because it'll be forced on them. And whether they go away and they still have their racist thoughts outside the game, fine. Just don't make it uncomfortable for the players who you turned up to watch.
The one thing about booing, for example, the national anthem, or booing booing national anthem is an offence according to UEFA, but booing a team taking the knee, or making a Nazi salute, or doing a funny walk is not. Okay, we're going to the break right now. Come back with a very, very short version of our hot topics. So stick around for that. We are back. Right, we are going to go straight into some hot topics. Luckily, we're only 2 people today, so I'm going to ask you both for, let's just say, a quick 2-minute. start off, say gentlemen first this time. Andrew, over to you. 2 minutes, your hot topic.
Well, I mean, there were quite a few little possibilities this week, but I think one is actually one of the longest running anyway. Sepp Blatter and Michel Platini's fraud trial beginning. It feels terribly dragged out. That's the first thing I'd say. This is relating to an alleged offence in 2011, I think it was, of the payment made between the two. Now, Sepp Blatter, we know his history. We know how he came to power. And that is exactly the right phrase to use, coming to power. It's a lobbying game. It's a politician's game. He latched himself onto Yao Havelang in the 1970s, I think it was. It was early as that. He realised the way to get ahead was he had to ensure loyalty. Now, influencing what happens in decision making at the highest levels of football, it needs to be. It's a pointless thing saying that. It's never going to be, but it needs to be controlled. It needs to be regulated, and it needs to be punished if wrongdoing has happened. Now, 11 years since this happened, this payment from Blatter to Platini, they have both faced different charges. They were indicted in November last year, I believe it was. What is going to happen now? Well, at worst, two men who are no longer the power brokers in football are going to potentially face charges. What difference is that going to make? They've set up deals. They've had their career. They've had their power. They've enjoyed it. There is no punishment that really is going to fit the long list of alleged misdemeanors that they've committed. Now, how can sport be regulated in this way? It's never going to be. There's no point trying to pretend. One of the questions we ask ourselves on this show so regularly, isn't it, is what can be done? Well, realistically, absolutely nothing. Because football is too powerful. Football is too enmeshed in so many areas. I don't know what this trial will, but I don't hold much hope.
Okay. No, I agree with there's an awful more to come out of this, and it's going to be very interesting how it's going to end up. Andrew, you might want to drop out and come back in because I think your connection has gone altogether. Isel, your 2 minutes of glory with your sporting hot topic. I'm unmuting you now,
It
so
would
away you
help if
go.
I was unmuted, wouldn't it? You all want to
You
hear
did
me
an
for the
Alan.
2
You did an
minutes.
Alan.
So I'm actually going to start with the Stuttgart Open. I'm going to fly through two very quick hot topics. The Stuttgart Open, and it ties in with what we were just saying about racism in sports. So Nick Kyrgios lost to Andy Murray in the semi-final. Andy subsequently lost the final earlier today. However, during the course of Nick's game, Nick, who was animated at the best of times, became involved in an argument with the chair umpire at one point. He had a penalty points deduction as a result of his argument and behaviour at one point. And then, following on from the game, he basically revealed on Instagram afterwards that he had been subject to a racial slur from the crowd. At one point, it did seem that he was getting very irate back to the crowd, and clearly something had been said. But from a tennis point of view, there obviously the organisers are saying they're looking into it, etc. But it's in all sports, and I think that's the thing we need to remember. There is no sport where racism isn't a factor, and where there doesn't seem to be that element of people in crowds who feel they can make those sort of comments. And it's very disappointing because Nick is a love him or hate him character. He's Marmite to a lot of people. But seeing things like this happen at a tournament, which obviously Stuttgart, Austria, so it possibly ties in with what we were saying earlier, is just very disappointing. And I suppose the perception of tennis fans is slightly different. The last thing I'm going to mention very quickly is a follow-on from earlier when we were talking about Deshaun Watson. So in the next few weeks, I think what we're probably going to see is the potential for Deshaun Watson to have a long period out of the game forced upon him. And at that point, it's going to become very interesting to see what the Browns have actually contractually obliged to do with him. Because from a legal perspective, there was a lot of discussion when he moved and when the rumours were obviously already out there and the accusations, that while his sign-on fee is guaranteed, there is a possibility that words like masseur and unauthorized massages might appear somewhere in his contract, that if per se further allegations are to come after his signing on, that may have knock-on consequences, whether it be termination or otherwise. And as of this week, the original 24 who were there when he signed became 25. And I think that's going to be a really interesting thing to see what happens there, because you can bet that if the Browns want to try and get out of this, they will have safeguarded something in his contract that while he gets his signing on fee, there will be some wording to deal with his penchant for getting unqualified masseurs via Instagram, which is an unusual penchant to have.
It is very, very much so. I mean, I don't know. I go for the odd massage down the road, but it's a man who does a massage, so happy end is the last thing on my mind. Andrew's back with us. Sorry, I didn't even need to finish that off, but like, there you go. Finish being
it
worst
gets
word.
better.
Yeah, okay. Right. One thing as well with Deshaun Watson, his first year salary, guaranteed salary. Okay, so he gets like, I think, almost 9 million per year in his signing bonuses every year he gets it. But his first year salary, which starts now, is I think less than 2 million, which people, it's all back ended as well. It's like back ended. So next year he gets 46 million guaranteed. The year after, 46 million guaranteed. It's almost as if the Browns knew that he was going to maybe not be playing this season. It looks like that they had this set up. And I think it's an absolute disgrace, because also this week they were speaking, of course, about the salary cap and how they're avoiding it, and cash-rich people paying cash to players above the salary cap. I know Andrew thrown into a chat earlier about Walmart buying Denver Broncos. Some of these companies, some of these teams who have companies investing in them, like the Patriots as well, don't need to abide by the salary cap. Okay, I'm going to move straight into the next part straight away without a break, because it is sports movie magic. Okay, I'm going to start off straight away. Our topic this week, okay, the one that we're going to cover this week that I asked the guys to go and have a look at, is a movie from 1989 called Major League, starring, well, as you can see here, Charlie Sheen, Corbin Burnson, who was very famous for LA Law at the time, Tom Berger, who was an evil person in Platoon, Wesley Snipes, a very young Wesley Snipes, Rene Russo, and many other people who really broke through from that. It's based on a kind of a true story. Well, it's based on a true story, kind of based on a true story of Georgia Frontier, I think it was. She had inherited the LA Rams from her husband when he died. And after 15, 16 years, she ran the team down and moved them to her hometown of St. Louis. Now, she then died, and basically her estate was sold off to Stan Kroenke. Of course, many people know him more for his relations to English football, who then 5-6 years ago moved the team back to LA. It's about a team who are losing. Of course, at the time it was made, it was already 25 years since Cleveland had won anything. They'd won some indoor soccer, for example. They were quite good at soccer, but they'd won nothing of any note since 1964, and they didn't win anything until 2019 when the Cleveland Cavaliers with LeBron went and won the NBA championship. Interesting movie. We see here Tom Berger is a catcher. Jake, what's his name? Jake. Taylor. Yeah, like Jake Taylor comes back. Talking here to Rick Vaughn, or Wild Thing Rick Vaughn. Okay, Andrew, I'm going to start with you. You have to watch the movie, correct?
I admit I had never even heard of it until yesterday. I'd only finished watching it about an hour ago, and I have to say it was absolutely perfect. It was brilliant. Now, when I saw the date of the movie, 1989, and I saw Charlie Sheen is in this film, I thought, there are going to be so many cheesy 1980s gags about how much of a ladies' man he is. When I saw his name was Wild Thing in this, oh God, Charlie Sheen's going to just lap this up. But he wasn't, by some stretch, he wasn't the funniest person there. I never realised how funny Wesley Snipes was. His comic timing and the number of characters. I think my favourite thing about this film is the number of characters who weren't just goofball characters for the sake of a quick, cheap laugh, the Pedro, the Cuban big hit. I've forgotten his Serrano. That's it. With his voodoo storyline. It was there for a bit of a laugh, but it didn't go too far. Wesley Snipes, honestly, his timing, his comic expressions were just absolutely perfect. Charlie Sheen didn't take over the film like I expected him to, but it wasn't schmaltzy at the end. Genuinely, the sporting sequences, I wasn't entirely sure, and I love going into it having no idea how the film turned out. I realised, of course, that something good was going to happen at the end. It's a 1980s sports film, of course it would, but it was enough uncertainty to make it a genuinely entertaining storyline, and it was a great stick it to the man sort of feel to it. Just because having that cutout board of the owner in the dressing room, we're going to take off a piece of each win we need. We need 32 more wins to seal the title, and you guys think. There we go. It was just wonderful.
This is the owner, and I mean, oh my God, I did feel really bad for her at the time as well, because of the way she was being presented. And so she inherited the team. She was a showgirl from Vegas. She inherited the team, and the whole idea was she wanted to move the team to Florida. Now that was what we were made to believe at the start. So she wanted to move the team to Florida simply because she didn't like Cleveland. It wasn't nice. She hated the city. The team were losing. She was losing money. The stadium was falling down, which is actually the case in Cleveland. I mean, Cleveland Browns were disgracefully treated by the football team, by the city of Cleveland, but they were falling apart. So basically said, we've been losing. The whole thing is now we're going to finish dead last. So it seems like kind of Ralph Rangnick coming in to Manchester United. We've been losing. Now we're going to be totally shit. But so you get like the voodoo guy who can, like, the whole, as you said, the cast of characters are unbelievable. Like the coach, as we see here, Lou, he's been brought in. He was for him. He was brilliant from the very start. He's brought in because he's like managing some like small team and in one of the minor leagues, and they call him, and he's there working part-time in a car auto repair place, and they're like, oh, this is the Cleveland Eagles, and he goes, yeah, I think I'm a bit busy that week to go manage in the major league. Everything is good about this movie, isn't it, Liesl?
It is. It screams a movie of its generation. Like, let's face it, baseball films, there are some incredible ones which are very hard-hitting. Like Moneyball is probably one of the best films about sport from a fictional perspective. Field of Dreams, brilliant. This, of its era, of very much of its era. And I think the thing I actually really enjoy about it, and this sounds slightly silly, is that the bad guy in the film is actually a girl. It makes it a little bit different. And what I discovered was that there apparently was an alternate ending. I'm not going to spoil the ending, but there was an alternate ending where it was like, oh, turns out I am actually a sports psychiatrist in my own way with my master plan. It wasn't actually that I ever wanted to go anywhere, ever in the ending. That was the alternate ending, so it's fine. But I think there's something, like, you know how it's going to go. Let's face it. No one ever starts with a film where the idea is, we want our team to tank so we can end up going to Miami. And the team go, okay, we're going to try our very best, but ultimately we're going to end up in Miami, which, to be fair, would have been a better option. So you know already what the ending is going to be, but it still doesn't stop you enjoying them getting there. And that's, look, easy viewing is always good. And perhaps if they'd gone with an alternate ending where like the team end up in Miami and they're all like, here we are, it's great, life is good, we wouldn't have enjoyed it as much.
Hey, look, the whole thing, I think it's a very good commentary on American sport in general, but basically saying that a team can just be up and moved if they have less than X number of fans averaging per game. If they're losing money, they can be moved to a better market, which does make sense in some ways, but also it kind of, for me, we know from Ireland, from England, especially from Ireland, where you basically our bread and butter is amateur sports. So you basically play for your village, you play for your county, like it's just that wonderful kind of like feeling about it that you know these people. And here we see the cheering crowd, who of course dressed as Indians, and they are great throughout it. They're trying to do a Mexican wave with just the four of them, and they're there the whole time. You see as they improve, like everyone goes around it. Of course, Harry Doyle, who's the announcer, who basically just turns to drinking heavily during games to try to get himself through. Isa, go back to you on this one. When it comes to Andrew, two questions, Isa. Does it make it better that the lead villain is a woman? And secondly, what would you rate the movie out of 10?
I am 100% of the view that it makes it better that it's a woman, because it also, even her background, she's a showgirl. Everything is, she's not meant to be that female character who you instantly go, isn't she great? We hope everything works out great for her. She's inherited it. Everything is, she's there and just getting it by the fact that she once was a showgirl. Make all your assumptions as to the happy marriage they may have had prior to the film that we don't know about. Out of 10, let's give it a solid, for me, because I am quite critical, you may not have noticed, I'm going to give it a solid 7.
Oh, that's very good, actually. Oh, that's very, very good.
I'm it's getting bonus points for the fact that, can you imagine a film now trying to dress up fans in native Indian headdresses? Just imagine.
The number of references as well. It always makes it cringe, doesn't it? The number of references to Native Americans. It did make me a little bit uncomfortable. That was the one part that was a negative for me. But otherwise, you couldn't, at the time, that was the terminology.
They've changed their name. They've changed their name to the Guardians, the Cleveland Guardians. Andrew, question to you. I just want to say as well to Joel Amorim, who's watching all the way over in Portugal, big fan of Russian football in general, Russian football, brilliant historian as well. Been almost in a couple of sports before as well. He just said, very nice movie. I remember watching the movie back when I was a kid. Charlie Sheen had poor eyesight, as far as I remember, and Pedro Serrano was great. Exactly. I think Serrano, all kids loved Serrano. They were just like, he's brilliant. This big Cuban guy who just smacked the ball a million miles. It's just. And by the way, in 2011, just so you know, keeping on Capital Sports team, Charlie Sheen admitted that in order to prepare for the role, he actually played baseball quite a lot. He'd actually taken steroids. He was 2011, 2010. He'd taken steroids to bulk up for it. And I watched the interview, and he actually spoke about it, that he was being coached. Now, we know this in Hollywood. You're not meant to believe things at all. And basically, we know that a lot of actors and actresses, from Brad Pitt to even Tom Cruise, as far as I know as well, even though I love him, they do invest in their PEDs. Andrew, question to you. In terms of a sports movie, is it something that could actually happen? And secondly, what would you rate it out of 10?
Well, I mean, I think if we're talking about what a sports movie should be, it depends what your taste is. If you wanted a bit of a silly laugh, then Cool Runnings was one that I grew up. That was one of the earliest films I liked. But it really bore very little relation to actual sport, in my opinion. It was just a bit of a goofball film, which I liked. This film, I felt, actually dealt with the mood and the sort of a team bond quite well. I mean, it's this sort of this could only happen in America, in American sport, like you mentioned, because of the quite insane level of business that sport is run like. And now, I don't think it's a realistic film in terms of what is likely to ever happen again. But as a film, for me, I do like films where you can switch off and you can be guided by good characters. And I do think the characters, whatever level you want to pitch, whatever genre you consider the film to be, I thought the strength of the characters was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I'm less critical than Esau is, so I would give it a good 9 out of 10, because I would watch that again and again and again, and I would enjoy it. I have simple pleasures. I don't want to think when I watch a film most of the time. I want to be entertained, and I was entertained.
I have to fill for you for next week. Space Jam.
Oh God!
oh no, that was good. That was good.
It's so really interesting, of course, that Rennie Russo, she actually made her movie debut that, and also Neil Flynn, who was actually one of the guys walking in the port, is like, kind of, they're like, shit, they're really, really bad. He was the guy who ended up being, I forget, he's in different things. He was in the middle, and he was also in Scrubs. He was the janitor in Scrubs. So if you look at the movie hard enough, the janitor from Scrubs, a really cool, funny guy who is psychopathic, he is in it. That's Neil Flynn. A lot of Irish in it as well. And an interesting was the movie was actually shot in Milwaukee. Okay, so it wasn't shot in Cleveland at all. Also mentioned, of course, that it cost 11 million to make, and it made 75 million back at the box office. So, if you have good characters, good acting, solid script, and one of the iconic moments of it is when Corbin Burnson, who's Roger Dorn, who has a very expensive contract, sort of superstar guy, he comes out with his contract to the coach, hands it to him. What happens next, Cecil?
I was only half paying attention to your question. Sorry. I was thinking about watching Space Jam 2.
Oh, no. Okay, what the question was, there's a moment when Roger Dorn, Corbin Burnson, Isol, you've disappeared from us and gone silent as well. So she's muted herself. She's going to watch Space Jam 2. Andrew, you remember that moment when he comes out with his contract to coach?
Yeah. It was brilliant. He was picking out some clause in his contract that says I don't have to do. They were doing press ups as punishment if you misperform or something. And he said, "Look, in my contract here it says I'm not obliged to do any exercise that I deem uncomfortable to me. Here, what do you think of that?" And the coach throws the contract on the ground, doesn't say a word, unzips, and deposits on the contract from a certain part of his anatomy what he thinks of it, and walks off. And
he peed on it. He peed on it. You have to make that very clear because it could be something very
sorry, yes, I probably should be a bit more specific. He just pees on the contract and walks off, and it was just brilliant. Because in these sort of films, that character, the temptation probably is to make this down and out lower league manager who gets his shot at the big time, to make him some sort of, turns out to be some tub thumping, inspiring, powerful speaker. He wasn't. He genuinely didn't care, and that's what made him such a good coach in this little role. I thought that was brilliant.
I've never seen that happen. I did see where a manager in a soccer team got a player's contract and tore it up in front of him and threw it at him. I was quite shocked because I was only like 17 or something at the time, or no, I was 19 at the time. I was like, oh my God, I couldn't believe that happened. But I understood why it took place afterwards, because the manager told me then afterwards why he did it. But that when he takes and pees on the guy's contract, I think managers across the world, coaches across the world are going, oh, please, let me do that once. It's so iconic.
Can you imagine how much water you'd have had to have given Ralph Rangnick and given him before he went out all the contracts last year? He would have been like, look, lads, I've got to drink a lot of water and get all the water out here now. Here I go.
He'd have to borrow Mike Tyson's fake penis and the baby pee. So to just squeeze it, like, you know. Right. On that note, so 7 out of 10 from me, so 9 out of 10 from Andrew. Next week we'll have another sport. I'm going to set the guys another task. I'll do it tonight. I'm not going to say Space Jam. You know what I'm going to say? And this is an interesting one. I'm going to say Cool Runnings. Cool Runnings.
Cool Runnings.
There you go.
I wanted to pet egg for years, and then instead I got 2 huskies.
I'm all...
It was almost the same. My lucky egg.
I'm just picturing a young Esau with a pet egg. Go on, Eggy, here we go. I'm already giving you my mark. I'm
Did you not paint eggs in
I'm already giving you my
depraved childhood, had you?
Listen, okay, on that I'll say thank you very much. Joel Amram said that he said it's a very nice movie, and he agrees with you, Andrew. He says 9 out of 10. Tom Berger was a typical veteran player, struggling with knee problems. That's dead right, exactly. Couldn't get up. He was a catcher, and he couldn't move. Watch part 2, and part 3 is really interesting as well. It has a guy from, what was the name of that TV show where they went back and forward in time? Not Space Jam, Time Jam. Remember the one?
I know the one you're on about. Back to the Future.
No, that's not the one I wanted. It's a TV show where there's a
Doctor
split
Who?
in time. Pardon?
Doctor Who?
No. Jesus, what was that called?
Red Thingy-majiggy? No.
No, not Time Gate or Stargate. No, it wasn't.
No.
No, what was it called? Oh, come on, God, we're going to have to get this.
What? Okay, what else happens in it? Think this through. We need more details here, Alan. You can do this.
Okay, so
Can you
basically,
describe the characters?
he goes back and forward in time, or he goes back in time
The
to
time
change
traveler?
things. Kind of time, no, not time travel. He goes back in time, and he has him this kind of a guy who helps him, who like guides him along the way as well. He's a doctor something. He's oh god,
This really
oh
sounds like Back to the Future to me.
oh no,
It
it's not
also
Back to
sounds
the
like
Future.
Doctor Who to me.
No, I'm going to have to look at it now because oh god, it was you would have not. It was like oh
Oh, that's
um.
uncanny. I know it straight away now.
I mean, he. Oh, anyway, this guy, he's Gus, and he appears in the third one. I'm trying to remember his name. Gus. Okay, Major League Two is basically the growing pains. They've done really well, and what happens next to them, and how they're kind of like coming back. And Charlie Sheen becomes brilliant. Wesley Snipes is not in the second one, and he is a huge loss for it because I agree with Andrew. He was absolutely amazing. He's
Yeah.
so funny, and just crack me up like Willie Mays Hayes, like and he just takes the fun out of himself, and you can see that he's really good, like he's really, really good at what he does. I'm trying to remember what it was. No, I can't remember. But okay, it's basically it's the third one, um, Major League Three. I'm trying to see it here. I have it. Scott Bakula. What was Scott Bakula in? Quantum Leap. There you go. Quantum Leap. I just remember Quantum Leap before I could find it. Remember Quantum Leap? No?
I remember the name,
Never
but I
heard
don't
of
think I watched it. And I watched a lot of rubbish TV. Clearly,
Yeah,
quite clearly,
but
I
this
watched a lot.
this was very good TV. Very, very good TV.
Oh,
So
then it
okay.
wouldn't come on my radar.
it. That's why we don't know.
Okay, on that note, I say thank you very much. Have a very good night, guys. Thank you so much. Folks, of course, we're back next Sunday, so you can message in. Thanks for being with us this evening. You can message in, let us know what we should be doing better as well. And of course, your questions and answers as well. Next week, of course, we'll be looking at Cool Runnings, which is a very, very interesting, good movie. So until then, take care of yourselves, and you're back next Sunday night, 9 p.m. CET.